You're listening to the CD Baby DIY Music Podcast. Hey there, and welcome to the CD Baby DIY Musicians Podcast. My name is Kevin, and we're back with the second half of our two-part series on music licensing. If you didn't catch part one, I'd recommend going back and checking that episode out, maybe even before you listen to this one. It kind of sets the stage for what you're about to hear. You can find previous episodes on the podcast website, cdbabypodcast.com, or they're on iTunes as well. Just go to iTunes and search for CD Baby, and you'll find it there. Well, let's jump on into the interviews we have to wrap up the topic. First off is Peter Davenport from the Microsoft Game Studios. Peter is responsible for licensing the music that they use in the games that they produce there, but his job goes beyond that. He also takes care of any music clearance that Microsoft may need, whether it be to accompany a launch of a product or music that goes along with demonstrations and things like that. So it'll be cool to get his perspective on licensing. And then after Peter, you're going to hear from Steve Ricardo, who owns a label, Red Car Records, and also manages several artists. But music licensing has become a big part on how they strategize, reach new people, and make money with the music. But let's get going with my interview with Peter. Well, joining me on the phone is Peter Davenport from Microsoft Game Studio. How you doing, Peter?
Just fine.
Well, why don't you start out with what it is exactly you do over there at the Microsoft Game Studio?
I work at Microsoft in a group called Audio Acquisitions, and I'm involved with music supervision with the Microsoft Game Studios. So I work with the creative teams to select music and then license music for in-game use. My position also includes other product groups. So I also worked on CD-ROMs in the early days of CD-ROMs, Encarta, World Atlas, those kinds of things.
Uh-huh.
And then I have worked with MSN Music and working with labels to sign to the music service, and really anything that involves licensed music across the company I get involved with.
Is there a lot of people in that department working with you, or is it
No, really, we've had up to 5 people in this group in the past, but now we're down to 2 people who actually do the music supervision work and track selection with product groups. And then we have a music licensing woman here, Lily Cohn, who does all our U.S. licensing, and then we have a group in Europe that does the European music licensing. But as far as the actual selection of music and music supervision, it's just really 2 of us now.
Wow. Well, for this interview, I wanted to focus on your work with Xbox and the games that you guys produce. To start us out, can you just tell us a little bit about the process of how a game even comes to pass from the idea to the production, and then at some point where you would come in as far as the music supervision?
Well, the process begins before I get involved, but and I'm not. I don't know that I can speak to the very beginnings of the process, because over at Microsoft Game Studios, they determine what kinds of games they're going to be developing. They've worked on Project Gotham Racing from the very beginning. We used to do lots of sports titles as well, NFL, ice hockey, Amped, the snowboard game, NBA, and various products like that, which Microsoft Game Studios is no longer involved with. But we still have our racing titles, and there are various other new titles that will be coming up this next year and the year after. The game studios determine what projects they want to work on, and they work with third-party developers on those. They determine what they're going to be working on, and then if it involves music, which inevitably it does at some point, they contact me, and then I get involved at the point when they're setting budgets and determining what kind of music they're going to need for a project. Mm-hmm. So the very beginnings of the project, frankly, I'm not exactly sure how that decision making is begun, but my part of it comes in when they decide to move forward with a project, and then they need music. So I'm called in, and we sit down with the creative team, the project manager, and the audio lead, and talk about what kind of music is going to work for a given project.
So when you're called into the mix, are you typically dealing with a game that's already almost finished or pretty far down the road?
No, in the early days that was the case, and now they know, all the teams know that the earlier the better. We need at least 6 months to 9 months really to do the best job on music selection and licensing, because the licensing process takes time, and really honing down on the best possible tracks to put in a game takes some time. So, but the first year that Xbox came out, we were a little late getting going, and we only had a couple months to do the whole process from beginning to end. But now, we take about 9 months. So I'm called in usually in the summer or fall, a year before a product comes out. Usually products, they try to get out around holiday time to take advantage of the holiday market. And so we're working about 9 months to 12 months out, and I'll meet with the team, as I say, and we go over exactly what genres are best for a given project.
So what are those meetings like? I mean, does the producer come in and say, the guy who's producing the game, or the people that are producing the game, do they come in and say, we want this kind of song here in this spot in the game, or this song, or do they just kind of give some blanket ideas? Or
well, every project is a little different. With Project Gotham Racing, it's a car racing game, and I've worked on all 4 versions of that, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we've had different cities involved each time. In Project Gotham Racing 2, we actually had 10 cities around the world involved, so you race through the streets of London or Paris, New York, Las Vegas, Tokyo, and we sat down with the audio lead at Bazaar, the third-party developer in UK, as well as the Redmond team here, the audio lead here, and the project manager, and sat down and really talked about what we wanted to do, given all those cities that they were going to recreate and very realistically recreate. So we wanted music that would fit and add to that environment. So when you drive through the streets of Paris, you'd hear French popular music on the radio, or drive through Barcelona, you'd hear Spanish music on the radio. So we knew, we outlined, the styles, the international styles of music we wanted: French hip-hop, German electronica and rock and that kind of thing. And then we'd work with the labels, independent labels and major labels, to find out from their catalogs what artists they were coming out with when the game was going to be coming out, and then we'd go from there and refine track lists down to the best selections.
So when you're thinking about music, I've heard that the budgets for music in games can be a little bit on the small side. Is that something where it favors the indie artist when you're out there looking for music and trying to make all these tracks fit within the music budget?
Right, and I've worked on projects that have had lots of tracks. So like in Gotham, in Gotham 2 we had over 200 tracks. In Gotham 3 there were about 100 tracks. And so with that many tracks, the per track, and that's with 100 different artists also. So the per artist, per track amount of money is not that great because you're trying to get so much in, and we've been paying on a flat fee basis, so it's not a royalty payment. So yes, the fees are somewhat low, but we've been able to work with independents, and majors have been enthusiastic about being involved with us because we've been able to do other things as well as just money, including logos in the game, including signage. Like when you drive down the street and you see a billboard, you can have an artist name on the billboard, and things like that give added value to an artist or a label. But yes, in general, it has been desirable to work with independent labels, and I like to work with independents as much as possible because they're the most enthusiastic and the most fun to work with.
Where do you go to look for those artists? You know, when you're got a list and you say German electronica,
right,
and French hip hop, and then maybe indie rock from the Northwest. I mean, where are you guys going to track down that type of music?
Well, I go to conferences. In fact, I just got back from MIDEM, which is a big international music conference in southern France, and I go to that every year. And then we go to South by Southwest and other trade shows and music conferences, and it's an ongoing dialogue with record companies, lots of independents as well as the majors and music publishers, to know what they're coming out with, how their catalogs are growing, and who they're coming out with each year. So I get tons of recordings in the mail from everyone, from hundreds of independents and the majors, and then I meet with people at these conferences, and we go over who they're coming out with, who they think is really going to be hot at a certain time of year when the game's coming out, and that kind of thing. So I'm aware of what labels are coming out with, and then when I talk to the creative teams, I know already what labels are coming out with that will work in a project. So I basically put the word out to all those labels that, okay, we're working on this game and send me your latest. And I already know the people really well, so we have a good relationship with lots of the independent labels. And we can discuss. It's kind of a back and forth process to pick the best tracks that work.
Now, you mentioned that it can take 6 to 9 months to get everything cleared for
right.
a game. What is all involved in actually clearing the song? Why does it take so long?
Well, you need to go to two sources. You need the record company to approve and the music publisher. And sometimes a track of music involves more than one publisher. The artist may own part of the publishing. They may have a major publisher like EMI or Universal Publishing or Sony Publishing that you've got to get approval from. And the record company usually needs to go to the artist to get their approval to be in a project. So that all takes time. And we're not the only, game, because the fees are, somewhat low compared to what a label can get for an advertisement, for instance, on television. So we're not the highest priority, although everyone thinks it's cool to be in an Xbox game. So they do want to be responsive, but it does take a few months for that process to work through. But generally, we like to give ourselves at least 6 months if possible, just so that we can make sure that we get all the, everything finalized before the game is released.
When you're securing the rights, are the parameters typical to what someone might request in a TV commercial where they'd say it's going to run for X amount of time and in the U.S. or maybe regionally, or what are the parameters of a license for the music in an Xbox game? Well,
we need to get rights for worldwide use because our products are sold internationally. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing, is that it has to be worldwide. And as I say, we have licensing people in London also who are in the same time zone as the European labels. So, if we need German techno, our London licensing office is dealing with those communications. But it's a worldwide license, and generally we need to cover the life of the product. So, it's out in 1 year, but then it's got a life that goes beyond that 1 year that is the release year. So we need a term that goes, I'm not positive, but I think it's a 5-year term in general, because those products, take on a life beyond that first year.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure we're covered.
You mentioned that, people send in music to you. What kind of formats do you like it in? Just like typical CDs sent to you, or people sending links?
It has been CDR and CDs, but I'm sitting on about 20,000 CDs right now, and so I'm encouraging artists to send and labels to send on FTP in a digital form if that's at all possible.
Yeah.
But I still take CDs if that's the easiest way for people to submit. And I really like hearing what independent labels are putting out. So, I have this ongoing communication with not only labels but aggregators like CD Baby and IOTA and The Orchard and these big aggregators that deal with lots of independent artists. So, and the people at those aggregators will help me identify, because they have thousands of artists involved, so they help me identify what the best ones are for a project. So, digital is best. If an FTP is great now. I've also been encouraging people to use these little USB. What do you call them? Those small USB things that you can
thumb drive.
Yeah, little drive. I think those are very cool, and at Mid-M this year I got a couple of those from labels, because they're, now you can get them in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gigs, and you can put your music on them. They're small. You can plug it right in. I can plug it into my computer. They don't take a lot of space. So if any artist wants to make it easy for a music supervisor and to make your music stand out, I would encourage you to use that, because not very many labels are doing that yet. And I can hang them over my lamp here and have them right next to my desk, whereas a CD is lost on my shelves here.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's
a great
tip.
way to submit.
Yeah, I'll have to hunt down some companies that do that and get some links up.
Yeah.
The ones that people have given you, have they had like logos printed on them and everything?
That's great. Logos and contact information. And even if it's I've had people send CDRs with a card thrown in, but that's not really the best way, because the card can get separated from the CD. So it's really best to have all your contact information right on the CDR printed right on it. And same with these USB things. And make sure that the artist's contact info is right on whatever you send.
Well, is there a resource out there that artists and musicians that are interested in getting some music placed in video games, is there any resources out there that say what games are in production, or in any inside industry magazines or forums?
There's that website, Music for Games, which I think is great. It's music and the numeral 4 games.com. I would go there and find out, because that has information for musicians about what games are coming out, and all kinds of advice for musicians trying to get their music in a game. So that's a good site. And then for any musician who wants to hook up with a game or music supervisor on a game, you really, before you just send out music blindly, it's a good idea to do some research on what games a developer's involved with, so you know if your style of music fits a project. I get a lot of music like from singer-songwriters that there's no way I'm going to be able to use it because it doesn't fit car racing.
Yeah.
So you need to any artists out there, and I'm open to independent artists and independent labels, but what makes it most effective is if they are aware of the project that I'm working on, and that can be by just sending me an email, and I'm willing to take emails from anyone out there, really, and say, what is it you're working on, and what kind of styles are you looking for, and that kind of thing.
Are there some genres that tend to be more popular in games? The games that I've seen, it seems like heavy metal, hip hop, a lot of
right.
Punk rock seems to be popular, but are those the genres that are most licensable?
Yes, but I've used jazz, I've used classical music, I've used bhangra, I've used world music in games, so I wouldn't take anything for granted, but it's true that, with car racing you can imagine what it would be, or if you're putting out a basketball title, you can imagine that it would be hip-hop, or football, hard rock, and hip-hop, and, you can imagine what the styles would be given the project. Or if it's an urban action game with, shoot-'em-up kinds of things, you can imagine what styles you would need. But with car racing, like Project Gotham Racing, we can try lots of different styles as long as the pacing is fast for car racing. Although, even that, now we're trying out not necessarily super fast pacing, because sometimes, even though you're driving fast, sometimes it's nice to have a layback soundtrack.
Yeah.
Car racing allows for a wider variety of styles than some game projects. So.
Well, I think that's all the questions I had. I appreciate you taking time to talk to us, and I know our listeners will appreciate hearing from you.
Sure. And if if you have more questions, feel free to call back.
Okay. Well, I want to thank Peter once again for being on the podcast, and I hope that helps you kind of understand how video games and even just a software company like Microsoft goes about acquiring music for what they do. Moving on, we're going to talk with Steve Ricardo, like I mentioned, and how indie labels, and specifically his indie label, Red Car Records, is using music licensing as a big part of how they get the music out there. Hey, Steve, how you doing?
Good, how are you, Kevin?
Good. So, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your label and the artists you work with, and then we'll move into how music licensing has impacted their careers.
Okay, well, I actually have two different companies. One is a management company, Twisted Rico Management. I've represented artists and producers for the last 10 years. And Red Car Records is something that evolved out of one of the bands that I actually managed, the Charms from Boston. We weren't getting what we wanted to get for offers from labels, so we decided to start our own label and release the band's CDs through the label. So it started off as basically just being the Charms, but then we started signing other bands. We signed the Esperantos from Michigan, the Midnight Creeps from Providence, Rhode Island. We released a Charms DVD. We've done a bunch of licensing deals with different bands, like Rosie Huntress, who's a solo artist, 8 Bitches from Maine. They're like a chip-hop band. And we also have a division within Red Car that handles, if other bands can come to us and can hire us to help them with their licensing or college radio promotion or publicity or whatever need be, it's turned mostly into a licensing type thing. And basically we're just shopping their music out there, TV, film, whatever, wherever we can get licensing, basically. That's kind of a synopsis of the whole Red Cartoons company.
So now that you hear in the news all the time about how the music industry seems to be changing, whether or not it's really going all digital, or that's still to be determined, but there's definitely a change going on in the music industry, and it seems like music licensing has become a bigger income stream for indie artists, and you've told me about several pretty big placements that you've had for your label. Has that become a bigger part of your strategy as a label?
Well, first of all, to address the first thing you said, the whole metamorphosis of the music industry in general has been kind of a difficult thing in some ways for somewhat of a dinosaur like myself, who started working for like labels like Enigma Records and Giant and Metal Blade, and I worked for A&M also. But to see what has happened now in the last 5 to 10 years, it's been really hard because jobs in the music industry have become obsolete. And at the same time, the licensing thing, I think, started right around the time when people realized that it was going to be hard to tour, it was going to be hard to get deals, it was going to be hard to make things happen. So all of a sudden, all these independent guys started popping up everywhere, plugging independent bands into TV and film, TV commercials, whatnot, and it's opened up a whole new area. I think it was maybe 5 years ago was the first time I saw an article in the Hollywood Reporter about a bunch of these LA independent guys. A TV show would call up and say, well, we need a song that sounds like the Beatles, but we can't afford the Beatles, so give us a pop band that sounds like the Beatles. And that started happening a lot. In fact, it happened to the Charms with ABC Family Channel. We basically got the call. They were looking for something that was kind of like Joan Jett. They wanted, their definition of Joan Jett was pretty broad, because I wouldn't say that LEV from the Charms actually sounds like Joan Jett, but the song was a rock song, Give Me That Shot, and it did sound like an anthem-type Joan Jett-type song, like I Love Rock and Roll, and they ended up using that. So I think what started happening, and has really developed more and more, is that people don't want to spend the money, people being the music supervisors and whatnot, for the big artists, so they're trying to find smaller artists that can, fill that role.
Have you seen that income stream maybe replace some income streams that are harder to find these days, like a large amount of record sales? Does that seem to even out, or?
It could be much more profitable, actually, I mean, you can actually, if you can get on a roll and you can get a lot of licensing deals happening, you can actually make more money than you could for an entire year off maybe 2 or 3 deals if you're an independent band. Mm-hmm. I mean, because, if you get into film, you can make, the all-in advance could be anywhere from 10 to 30. If you get a TV commercial, a lot of them are like $30,000 advances. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really a band an independent mid-level band making $30,000 in 1 year. That's a pretty successful year in this day and age. Because when you go on the road now and you're playing the club scene, if you're playing in front of I managed a band not too long ago they did a full-on tour, and they were averaging like 60 to 100 people a night, and they pretty much broke even at the end of the tour, I mean, it's really hard to do that now, because people don't really care. Punk is still drawing, and metal is drawing, but indie pop, unless you're a big high-profile band or a garage, it's just not, the draw is just not there unless you package a bill together with 5 or 6 bands and do it that way, and then that can't even be profitable in some ways. So, yes, to answer your question, you can do well with licensing, and a lot of different places that you can license. I haven't been able to tap into every one of them, but a lot of things have been really helpful, especially for the songwriters, because they're the ones that can really profit. If you own your publishing, the publishing is the most important thing. If you own that, you're in a pretty good position if you get placed.
So you mentioned it's a pretty good thing to get tapped into. Well, how do you get tapped into that income stream? Or what have you done in order to build those relationships and contacts in the licensing world?
That's actually the key phrase right there, build, because it is something that you have to build. Yeah, there's been a couple of lucky calls that I've gotten here and there, and one guy needed a song for a movie, and he was a producer, so he produced the track of the band and helped us get in the movie. But a lot of times, I'll just use the MTV network, for example. It took a long time to build up a relationship with them and to get to the point where now I have several different bands that I work with that get checks on a regular basis from MTV shows. Because what MTV does is they don't pay advances, but the publishing on the back end is really good because a lot of their shows, like Made, my Super Sweet 16, shows like that, they air over and over again. So if you get a placement on one of those shows and it keeps airing and airing over and over again, you're going to see good chunks of cash every quarter coming from them. And it took me a while to get that relationship going, and now I've got a few different supervisors that I work with over there. They do what's called a blanket license now. So if you sign a license with them, they can use the songs that you sign over to them on any one of their shows, on their VH1 shows or MTV, Nickelodeon, Spike, Comedy Central. They control a big part of that whole licensing deal right now. It's the same with everything. There's different people that handle different shows and different companies that handle films and work with different directors. Like Cameron Crowe always uses Nancy Wilson as his music supervisor. Not always, but he's used her a lot, and she taps into the music that she wants. Obviously, a little bigger than some of the people I'm working with, but that's just an example. A lot of people have their own, people that they work with. So, yes, you've got to develop. Like, I'll give you a quick example here. A friend of mine has worked on a lot of movies over the years. His name is Mark Constance. He worked on Charlie's Angels and Bad Boys and Being John Malkovich, movies like that. He's working on some movie with Kevin James right now in Boston. He's also starting to produce his own films. And he produced one film this year, which is still looking for a studio deal, with David Strathairn. I don't know if you know who he is. He was nominated for an Academy Award a couple of years ago. So he's working with some big people. He just basically offered me a gig to be a music supervisor for a couple of his films that are coming up at the end of the year. Now, I never would have been able to get in that position if I hadn't already been dealing with licensing, because it's a complicated thing to get into. I've been doing this for a long time. You just can't learn how to do it overnight. If you're a newcomer, all I can suggest that you do is send your music out to as many people in this genre, in this world that you can, and just hope that somebody picks it up. I mean, it's a crapshoot in a lot of ways, but if you're not in Santa Monica having lunch with, somebody from the Discovery Channel or whatnot, it's hard for you to, actually make these contacts. You got to be in the right place at the right time. MySpace, believe it or not, a lot of people actually pay attention. I had someone contact me that heard a Charm song on MySpace and wanted to use it for a TV commercial once, Just get your music out there, basically.
So you mentioned, sending your music out to as many people as possible. Are you referring to just sending out your music to music supervisors unsolicited, or are you talking about hooking up with a licensing company that will do that on your behalf?
You know what? How about both for an answer there? Because, unsolicited, I love that unsolicited word because, it's like, what is solicited? How many people at these licensing companies are actually out there looking around and trying to find people to get them to send them music? If you can't get something in the mail sent to you, I know a label in Boston. The guys developed an unbelievable relationship with the Shield just because he started sending things. They've used about 15 of his songs on their show, and it's just because he unsolicitedly sent them some CDs. I mean, I hate it when you get these companies that'll say, "Oh, we didn't ask for this, so we're going to send your envelope back to you." That's pretty lame, okay? I mean, at least, if you're going to do that, you can throw it in your pot. I mean, I worked in an A&R department at a major label, and we had about a room stacked up with 3 zillion things. We tried to get through as much of them as we could, but, we're not sending them back. I mean, geez, this is a big thing for a band, Well, I found somebody at this company in LA that does TV shows, and I'm going to send them my CD. It's a big deal. People send me stuff all the time. I don't, if I don't like it, I can't get back to them. I can't get back to it. Then if I like it, but I'm not ready to do something, I try and send them a note. So yeah, why not? I mean, what do you get to lose? $1.60?
So is there anything that you've seen that's helped when you're sending out material that's helped get through all the glut of all the CDs that they might be getting? Or is it just total luck, or is there anything you've noticed?
How I am, Kevin, is all I have to do is get one little glimpse or ray of hope from one person. Like somebody will say to me, yeah, you know, I was walking, I was down in Santa Monica having lunch, and at the next table I met this guy. He works over at Disney, and he has something to do with music. And I told him that I knew someone that had some music, and here's his name and number. You know, I honestly, I don't really care how I find out, you know. Or, you know, sometimes it'll find out through one band that I'm working with, and, you know, not that I'm using one band's contacts for another band, but I'll slowly kind of creep, you know, things into a conversation, because you want to, they're looking for specific things, okay? They're not, you know, you can't call up and say, I have a band, you know, they sound exactly like Metallica, and we want to place them. You know what they're going to say? They're going to say, well, if we get a scene that needs something that wants a thrash metal band in there, we'll call you, you know?
Uh-huh.
I mean, so you got to kind of like lay it out there for them that you have a lot of different things. Like I placed something recently with Discovery, and, you know, after like, there's been like at least 5 different MP3s that I've emailed this person for different things that she's told about, and she hasn't liked any of them. Not that she doesn't like them, it just doesn't fit.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about timing and fitting and being in the right place. One of my favorite placements that I've seen lately, I don't watch a lot of TV, but the best placement I've seen lately is, I don't know if you saw the Bud Light commercial where the Dalmatian jumps out of the Bud Light truck into the Miller truck.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
That one was pretty good, but then the new one that comes out, they have the Dalmatian, a bunch of Dalmatians see that Dalmatian, and they start chasing it, and the song is Jailbreak by Thin Lizzy. And I'm like, this is perfect. You know, here's a song that came out like 30 years ago, and it's like now it's on a TV commercial, and it fit. So it's about finding something that fits, really.
Uh-huh. Well, before we go and wrap this up, I wanted to... You had a pretty big placement with Charms recently for the Learning Channel. Why don't you tell us how that one came about and what it entailed?
Well, this was an interesting situation because I'm sending a lot of people out to a lot of people. I'm trying to get in touch with a lot of people, and I never really had the conversation with the music supervisor on how exactly she is. She did get a hold of the CD or whatever, but basically she was a fan of the band, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's not like I went out and found her and said this song would be perfect for your show. It was for the show Trading Spaces. She got in touch with me and said, what do we have to do to get this song? And I explained it to her because it was a complicated situation because we didn't own the master on that one, but we did control the sync publishing. And so basically what I had to do is I had to get her in touch with the people that own the master, and we had to get them to sign off, and then we signed off on the publishing. It was a lot of paperwork. It's really weird. Just here's something to be prepared for when you're in this business and you get a commercial. That commercial ran in January, and we still haven't gotten paid yet because we're still dealing with paperwork.
Oh,
okay? So these things sometimes take a long time once they happen. And, you know, you got to appreciate the exposure because the other things that have to follow suit on that sometimes take a while to happen. It's a lot of paperwork and a lot of follow-up. Someone has to be ready to do the business because you got to be able to, like, you know, take care of that part of it. Otherwise, you know, it could fall through the cracks. But anyways, we had this national commercial for Trading Spaces. The Charm song was called So Romantic. It fit perfectly into their plan. It didn't run a lot, but it ran fairly regularly, and the money was good, and, well, I think it's going to be good as soon as we get a check. But, you know, it was almost like it really was a great thing for us to happen because it happened at the right time. It's very exciting for a band to get a song on TV or in a film because it's not like getting played on the radio or going and playing in front of 500 kids, you know, at a show. It's like all of a sudden people that would never hear your song are going to hear it. Mm-hmm. It's a whole different ball game.
Have you seen some of those placements translate into record sales or download sales?
Ironically enough, the ones that seem to do the best are the MTV ones. One song that, you know, the Charms I'll use for an example, have had placed several times on MTV shows is Candy from their So Pretty record. And every time that song seems to be on the air, the downloads always go up, on iTunes especially. So I think if they can figure out the song title, they'll usually look for it and they'll find it. If you really want to find something, I've been in that position many times where I hear something, I want to find it. The Internet's awesome because you can always find it. Sometimes you only have to put the song title in. So yes, to answer your question, it has translated for us. I mean, the more you can get, the better. I mean, I know that, I think it was the Dolly Rots. They had a really good placement recently, and that translated into sales for them because I know their manager, and that turned out to be a really big deal for them. And, some of these iTunes commercials on TV, where they use bands are doing really well. Whether Thin Lizzy Jailbreak started selling again when the Bud Light commercial came out, I can't answer that question, but I'd be surprised if people weren't wondering who that was, like a younger person, because it was a great song in 1978, but, now it's all of a sudden on a major TV commercial. For us, the answer would be yes, and the more the merrier, I think, the more we can get. We've been really working harder and harder on licensing. I'm the head of licensing, but it's a whole team of people that we work with that help it come together. We have to design a page, put all our downloads up there. We have to make it easy as possible for people to hear our stuff. So sometimes you have to get lyrics to someone right away. Like, we need the lyrics to this song right now. They'll not call you back or answer your emails when you're in touch with them, but when they want something, it's like making a movie. You stand around for like 10 hours, and then all of a sudden, hurry up and get over here and do this right now.
Yeah.
It's like that with licensing, man. You got to be prepared and ready. Usually when I'm out of town and I don't have my phone with me, that's when they want to license a song. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Any final words of advice for someone who wants to get into licensing, where they should start?
Find someone like me. No, I mean, it would be a lot easier, I think, for someone that wants to get into it to find a company like Red Cartoons. There's a lot of them out there right now that, you can, even if it's only a couple songs. I'm working with other companies. There's a couple companies that I've signed deals with for some of the bands that I represent, and they're out there shopping our songs for us, because I think you've got to look at every avenue, every avenue. Send your stuff to MTV, Who knows if it's going to get to the right person? How do you know it won't? I mean, send it to any of these TV shows. Everyone can't be in Santa Monica where everyone's hanging out, walking around the streets looking for the music supervisors. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. Get your stuff on MySpace or anywhere on the Internet. Make your CDs available, make your downloads available, and, if you build it, they will come, as they say, It's just, you never know. A lot of it has to do with luck, Kevin. A lot of it is luck.
Well, thanks.
How about 75% of it's luck, maybe more?
Well, there's still 25% that we can work with.
Yeah. Well, believe me, the 25% is really hard. But it is, it's just about being visible and being out there, basically,
Well, thanks for coming on the podcast and sharing some of your experience with music licensing.
Thank you. My pleasure, completely.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for our two-part edition of music licensing. I hope that helps get some conversation going and get some ideas about how you can get your music out there, maybe in ways you hadn't thought of before, and honestly, ways that didn't exist for indie artists until the last 5 years or so. But like I mentioned in episode 1, this is one of my favorite topics, so if you have any questions or comments, feel free to email us. I love talking about music licensing and would be more than happy to help you out. Just send us an email at info@cdbabypodcast.com. And while you're there, go ahead and sign up for our email newsletter and check out some of the past episodes. And also, we're always wanting comments and feedback on what we can do to make things better or show ideas. So if you have any of those things to pass along, feel free to send them as well. Well, that's going to do it. We'll catch you next time.
You make me wish that I could be your girl.
You've been listening to the CD Baby DIY Music Podcast, broadcasting from Portland, Oregon, USA.